Hi everyone, it's been a while since the last video, and since then I've seen a few exchanges online and on some forums about the imp gauges. The imp gauges are not that much of a mystery, but there's often a misconception on what type of gauges they are. Now, I came through here this evening and I will do a very quick run through imp gauges, roughly what I used to do for calibration for them, what I used and how to apply that to test the gauge and the sender in the car, so you can at least diagnose if it's a sender problem or if it's at the dashboard end. Now, the first thing we need to understand is that there are a couple of components to this. One is the voltage stabiliser, and it's sometimes referred as a voltage regulator, and there's also the gauge itself. These are not electronic devices. These both work on the same principle, where the current that flows through goes through a little bit of heated wire. That heated wire then heats a bimetallic strip, which is two metals that expand at different rates. So when you heat them up, it bends and bends a needle. Now, at a gauge a bit closer up, you can see the balance time, but then you can also see the bimetallic strip and the wire wound round about it, which heats it up. Now, if you blow hot air at this, that strip will bend and the gauge will read without any current flowing through it. That's the way it works. So imp gauges are inherently slow to react, which is a good thing. Otherwise the gauge would be bobbing about everywhere. But one of the most common things that I see people saying is, well, I've tested the stabiliser, it's not working. Well, the stabiliser is actually a very horrid thing to try and measure, and here's why. At the moment I have my power supply, and if you watch the amount of current that's drawn, for being static, it's jumping all over the place. Try and get a focus on that, there you go. So roughly doubling and stopping, and you can see the amount of current it's drawn. It's quite substantial. Now, this is a standard setup with a voltage stabiliser, but the output of that stabiliser is not a true DC voltage. It's really ugly, because the stabiliser works in the same principle as the meter. There's a small coil, it heats up, it breaks a set of contacts, breaks the wire, it cools down, it makes contact again, and the whole process starts again. So rather than having a constant voltage coming out of the stabiliser, what you actually get is this: a series of pulses, roughly averaging out to about 10 volts. However, if you go to try and read this on a digital multimeter, your poor multimeter will have a nervous breakdown. It doesn't like it. Analog meters stand a better chance because they have a moving coil and they don't react as fast as a digital meter. Now, RMS wise, I can measure that on, well, not that one, but I've got my 82 or 87 lying about somewhere. It will do RMS. But at the moment, that's output from that regulator, and as you can see, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. So that's the first thing. You would think that would affect the gauges with it going on, off, on, off, on, off, but actually it doesn't, because the gauges are thermal and they take a long time to react, so we don't see this. But it's a very crude and a very cheap way of doing the voltage regulation. I did a comparison with solid state regulators on hillmanimp.org that you're welcome to go and have a look at. That will explain the regulator in more detail, but at the moment I just wanted to point out that if you look here and your digital meter starts reading strange, it's not because it's faulty. You really need something that you can see the change in voltage with time to see if it's actually doing its job, and this one's doing pretty well. So back to the gauges. At the moment I have my 12 volts coming in, roughly, according to the scope, it's about a mean of 9.5 volts coming out. So as near to the 10 volts as damn it. I've seen these things as low as 9 volts, and I've seen them as high as 10.5 volts. So standard root stick tolerances in volts instead, so they're not accurate. Combine an error on the regulator to then combine an error on the gauge itself, and the amp gauges can be quite off. Now I've started off with the fuel gauge. As you can see, it's actually exactly the same gauge. There's no difference. I might have an extra winding on it or two, but other than that it's the same. So at the moment I have it wired, but in between I have this box. Now this box is simulating the fuel sender, and I can set it to anything I want. So what we're going to do is we're quickly going to say, right, okay, let's increase it really, really high, and we'll see the gauge dropping. Now, one of the other things you can see with the gauge dropping, you see it creeping right back up a little. There we're about 300 ohms. Now it's starting to creep up at 240 ohms, which is roughly about where the fuel sender starts. Let's get it right at the bottom. There's 230 ohms. So as you can see on this box, I can pick more or less what I want. I can increase, I can decrease, and I can do it in different increments. So that's us got it there. Now, to show you the thermal effect on there, have I got any freeze spray or nope, nothing like that handy, so I'll need to go old school. And cool it down by breath. And as you can see, the gauge has moved down and goes back up as it reheats again. So there you can see the thermal effect. No trickery required. Now there we go. So we've got 235 ohms roughly for empty. Let's go to 135 and see where we go. Bear in mind that this is heating up, so it will take a bit. You will also find that the gauge will read slightly differently in different ambient temperatures. So here we go. Kind of slowing up now at 135 ohms. Just speaking past it, let's take it to 100. So we're now at 100. And we're now shooting upwards. We're going past quarter of a tank, or is that about a quarter of a tank? You'll also find that the resistance steps against where it will actually read is also not linear. So let's see if we can get it up to halfway. It's now at 80 ohms and we're roughly halfway. Do the 60. So even if you didn't have one of these boxes and all you had was fixed value resistors that you can get from eBay, wherever, if you kept a 240 ohm one, a 100 ohm one, a 60 ohm one, you could replace the wire from any sender and you should get the same reading in your gauge, which would then let you test the gauge itself. Now, amp gauges should roughly be at full or full scale deflection at about 20 ohms. So we should see this one go all the way to the end now. And there is a reason I'm showing the fuel gauge first, because we're going to do the same exercise again in a minute with the temperature gauge. So there you go, that'll cook up nicely to sitting on full at roughly 21, 22 ohms. So if you give me 2 minutes, I'm going to down the camera and change over to the temperature gauge.